Hey there, thanks so much for joining me today. I see some folks in the chat already, which is great. I'm going to load up my project for today's live stream, and we're going to be talking about how to navigate really large projects. And this is going to pertain even if you're really a Dorico user. I'm sure you wind up doing some sort of final production in, whether it's Logic or Cubase or something like that. But in Cubase, which is the tool that I use, there's a lot of great features that can enable you to manage like dozens or hundreds of tracks, as well as dozens of sub-routing routines to stems or to deliverable files or alt mixes, and these things that composers and producers are often trying to manage. And I want to go over some of those because I think they also play a role somewhat in our Dorico workflow. I know my Dorico workflow has been developed in tandem with what's possible there. So yeah, thanks so much for joining me. I see Michael in here. I see Shubas. Thank you, Shubas. Yeah, nice to see you. Happy Thursday to you too. And let's just dive in here with a few topics over here. Why is this necessary? Why is complex routing and why is navigation necessary? For folks maybe who don't have experience with this or are maybe even looking for better ways that they can route their audio, I think you'll learn a lot from this video. But the reason it's necessary in my workflow is that in addition to composing, coming up with the parts, the arrangement, all that sort of stuff, I often need to submit to my clients many different versions. So maybe a no melody mix, maybe just a drums and bass mix, maybe just an underscore, which would be taking out a lot of the top layers, things like that, right? And I don't really want to have 3 different Cubase projects. That's in my view, it's onerous. I don't like to create multiple files if I can avoid it. I want to set up something where I can come back to the project in 6 or 8 months. If somebody says, hey, I really like that cue, but we need to take out the accordion, or the hi-hat is conflicting with the dialogue, can we kill that? Now, if you have stems, and which is sort of the first most basic form of complex routing, a lot of times you can solve problems. But when it comes to alt mixes, things like no melody, stems, you can get there, but there's more efficient ways. And that's why it's often necessary for producers to have very complex routing. But let's say that you've got your orchestra coming from Dorico and you've exported multi-track audio files. So you got your piccolo and your flute and you got all your winds and brass and so on and so forth. You got all these audio files and you route them all to stems like high brass, high winds, low winds, high strings, low strings, things like that, percussion. And you've got these group tracks or bus tracks, whatever the lingo is for the DAW that you're using. Now you want to create an alt mix, right? So you want to route some of the strings some of the time to maybe you've got the cellos and the double basses functioning in underscore, like with harmony, but you've got the violins functioning in melody. So for the no melody mix, you don't want to just kill the strings because you're going to want the basses and the cello in there. But for the underscore, maybe you got to kill the violins, right? So alt mixes is like another tier below stems, and you need some flexibility for maintaining your stems so that you still have your high and low strings, but then maybe in the alt mixes you can pick and choose what you want to have. And I'm gonna go through all of that, how I do it, but hopefully that gives you an understanding of why this is necessary. Why is it even necessary to have very complicated project files? The next question, or the next topic I'm going to touch on too, is visibility agents and visibility configuration. I'm going to show you what these are. So when you're in Cubase, I'm going to clean up my window here a little bit. So when you're in a Cubase window, up here above your tracks, you have this little thing that says Set Track Visibility Agents. Now, there's a few defaults here, which are very helpful. So you can say show tracks with data, maybe between locators. So if you're working on a particular section of your track, let's say you're working on a chorus, and you've got 100 tracks, but you just want to see the 12 that are active in that chorus. Well, you just hit, you just set your locators, you set your range for the chorus, and then show tracks between locators, and bang, you're just looking at those files. So these are sort of built-in visibility agents. There's one in particular that you'll see I use a lot in the mix console. What you see available here is a little different than what you'll see in Mix Console. So in Mix Console, if I open that up, we have a very similar looking icon up here, but this is channel visibility agents, which is a little different from what you see in the project. And here you have this really cool option, which is show channels that are connected to the first selected channel. And in typical in typical Cubase and Steinberg fashion, this is like what? What does that mean? So what it really means is that you can select a track and then you want to see everything that feeds into that track. This is great for VCAs, it's great for group tracks. So if I've got an alt mix that's, say, no melody, and I've got some stems feeding into it, but I've also got some individual instruments that should only go in there, then I can select my alt mix channel, hit this command, and it's going to show me just those tracks. I'm going to show you that. So let's imagine that I have here, I've got my deliverables. Well, I'll go with, okay, I've just got my melody. I've got my VCA track here, which anything that I link to the melody VCA track is going to be managed by that fader. And I do this because I use VCA tracks. If I just want to kill my melody for my no melody mix, I bring it down, boom. If there's something in there, let's say I'm like, wait a minute, oh, I'm sorry, I'm not on the right screen. Let's say that I'm on my VCA track here and I want to kill the melody from my melody alt mix. I'm going to bring VCA down. This is a multiplier basically. VCAs don't actually handle any audio, but anything that's assigned to this VCA, the fader will be scaled down. So any automation you have will be preserved. But naturally, if I bring the fader all the way down, that's going to pretty much mute anything. And you can see over here in my stems, which are all these purple tracks, you can see that I have assignments like underscore, drum and bass, effects. I've got, I know I've got some melody over here, so I've got melody. And if I wanted the low strings, which is this stem right here, I could select here and I could go, okay, I want to send that to underscore, or maybe what the low strings is really doing is more like drums and bass kind of thing, right? So that's why I'm using the VCAs. If I drop the melody fader and I still hear an errant melody, sometimes that can be really tricky, and you want to be able to use a combination of these features to narrow down what we're looking at. So visibility agents allow me to select only certain kinds of channels. Like I can say, okay, I'm hearing an accordion, let's just say hypothetically in there. It's really a melody instrument. For some reason, it hasn't been routed correctly. And I could go through and I can just look at just my audio tracks, just my instrument channels, just my sampler tracks, just my drum channels. Now, pretty much on this raw template project, I just have instrument channels, which is why everything's showing up there. But if I check, effect channels, you can see my reverbs are over here. If I click VCA tracks, you can see that I just get my VCA channels. So using these visibility agents is a great way of starting to narrow things down a bit and not have to look at all of the tracks in your project. Visibility configurations make it such that I can actually find exactly what I want. Like let's say I just want my audio tracks, then I could save a configuration and it would be just those things, and I can retrieve those. So these are the ones that I typically have set up by default. This is all my instruments. These are just my stems, right? These are just my deliverables. These would be like alt mixes or sort of more generalized stems. I also have all tracks, and then I have the alt mix VCAs right here. So I can just be looking at this and manage those as I go. Okay, so if you have questions, feel free to post in the comments. I know I'm running through things fairly quickly here, but I also want to keep things really practical for people who know their way around Cubase. So if I'm touching on something and you're like, whoa, what's that? It's very unfamiliar. Either comment right now in the comments in the discussion, and I'll check that out and try and respond. Otherwise, of course, you can leave something in the comments, and I'll get back to it later, including ideas for other things to use in the future. So visibility agents and visibility configurations can really help us to take a large project and just look at what is helpful to us. Sometimes that's in the way of creating our own visibility configuration, like we would do up here in this drop-down box. We add our own configuration. In the project window, it's similar. You can do something similar, but you know, you can set up a configuration here. Just be aware that there are some differences between how visibility agents work in the project window and the mix console window. And as you can see up here, these are called track visibility configurations, whereas in the mixer, they're called channel visibility configurations. So even Cubase has purposely made these a little different. Okay, but when it comes to tracing, this is kind of like really the most elegant solution. Let's say that I have, again, that I've got a drum and bass track, and I've got an 808 in there. I've got some kind of sub 808 in there. And when I effectively solo my drum and bass VCA by bringing all the other VCAs down, I should be listening to all my drum and bass. I know there's an 808 sub in there, but I'm not hearing it. How do I find it? How do I find where that channel is? Well, what I'll do first is I will go back to my mixer configuration, and I would go to my mix configuration for alt mix VCAs. And if I were finding, oops, I hit that by accident. If I were finding that in this configuration here, where I'm really only listening to my drum and bass, that I can't hear my 808, then what I would do is I'd bring these ones up and look for, well, which one has that 808 in it? If there's nothing that's, one of two outcomes is going to happen, right? Either it's going directly to the main mix, or it's going to one of those other VCAs. And this is how I would find it. It's a combination of features, but the most powerful here is actually the good old channel settings window. So let's say that I found that 808 mysteriously in my VCA for melody. I would select that track in my mixer again, and I would come down to the visibility agents, and I'd say show channels that are connected to the first selected channel. And then I would get these. And you can see up here in the VCA linking drop-down box that these are all selected to link to melody. So I would probably find that either the 808 sub was listed here, or I'd find that it was routed into one of these stems. And if it was routed into one of these stems, then I would naturally want to reroute it, because I don't want a sub 808 going into any orchestral stems. But I could also always just find it and change the setting for this alone. I could just send it to drum and bass like that. And then that track would still be routed to the right stem. I don't have to reconfigure the stem orientation at all. But now I know that it's not going now it'd be going into the drum and bass. Let's take the second scenario, which is that I can't actually find it in any of the VCAs. So let's say you're looking at this view, you've used your visibility config, and you can see that no matter which VCAs I bring up here, I'm never hearing that 808 again. Why is that? Or I'm always hearing it. Why is that? Well, it's because it's routed directly to the main mix, which it works just the same way with that visibility agent. So here I could select my main mix track down here, right? And then I do the same thing, go up to my agents, show channels that are connected to the first selected channel. And this shows me any tracks in my entire project where it's been routed to the main mix. You can see that under either direct routing or the routing up here, right? So I can see all of these tracks are routed to the main mix. Somewhere in here, in that scenario that I'm describing, one of these tracks would be my 808 sub bass. And then I would know exactly where it is, and then I could route it directly. So that's how I go about tracing, and I think this tool is really useful. You can actually use the channel settings window as well. So let's say that I were to just select a track and open up the good old channel settings window, which if you're a Cubase window user, hopefully you use this quite a bit. There's this really handy button up here that says show output chain. So we're going to hit show output chain, and you can see that it actually extends over here. So this is our track that we have the window open for. And then if that track were, let's say, going to, well, let's say that instead of going to the main mix, this were to go to my flutes stem. Well, then there you go. You get the flute stem, and by default, you get the Woodwinds deliverable, which is what flutes goes into. And just clicking this button up here extends out those mixers. So you can make sure you have level. If you see level here, but you see no level here, and you're wondering why none of the content from this track is ever showing up in your woodwinds or flutes, stems or deliverables or main mix, you can see where things are breaking down. All right. So the channel settings window also plays a really powerful role in tracing your audio routing. This all works with MIDI tracks. If the MIDI track is an instrument track, for example, and it's outputting audio, and that is routed to whatever track you've selected, and then you choose that visibility config or visibility agent for show tracks that are connected to the first selected track, you'll see instrument tracks, you'll see sampler tracks, you'll see it all in a very sensible view, because you know, okay, all the tracks I'm looking at are the ones that feed this bus, feed this VCA, feed this group. And by doing that, you can quickly trace a problem, trace something that's misrouted, or in the event of making something better, reroute it. Like you want to send that violin to your strings stem, but you also want to exclude it from the melody mix. Then you can use the VCAs. I'll say just very briefly that in my workflow, all of my instruments, all of them, anything that is compositionally part of the structure, everything gets routed to a stem, everything. It may also get a VCA assignment to either melody, underscore, drums and bass, or everything else, which is usually like special effects. So I have 4. Every instrument goes to a stem, absolutely. Optionally, I can send instruments also to those VCAs if I want to be able to know that I can mute them later on. And then I use VCAs for all that stuff. I don't do like, when I make an alt mix, I don't like reroute everything and save another project or anything like that. That's too much work. Do it with VCAs. Then all my stems, they all go into deliverables. So the stems are more broken down like high strings, low strings, but they both go to a deliverable file called strings. And I often actually deliver those as stems. You know, that's just one of those idiosyncrasies that occurs in my workflow. But I thought it'd be helpful. Instruments down into stems, down into deliverables. And if any point one of those is causing a mismatch where it's frustrating to create alt mixes, I can always go back to any tier and assign it with a VCA. If all the VCAs are at unity, then my mix is exactly as that's exactly my full mix. But I can always bring down my drum and bass, bring down my melody, whatever like that. I see a couple of comments. So Michael is just talking about VCAs here. Yeah, so hopefully I answered why I'd use VCAs instead of group tracks. I do use group tracks for all the stems. Those are group tracks. All my deliverables are group tracks. The thing about a group track is that the way that I'm using them, Just another example, I want to be able to separate out maybe my horns from my trumpets, but I want all of those to go to a brass stem eventually. But I may have my horns doing harmony and the trumpets doing melody. So if I want a no melody mix, it's not good enough for me to just kill the brass deliverable stem, because now I've lost my trumpets that were playing melody in order to, I've lost my horns, which are playing harmony, in order to kill the trumpets that were playing melody. So groups don't give me the flexibility unless I have really, like very super refined, and in my view, overkill refinement. Like I have, harmony trumpets and melody trumpets. And then suddenly I'd have like 400 stems. It'd be even more confusing. But using the VCA is very elegant, because I can always just assign a VCA to any track anywhere. And let me actually just give you a little demo here of that, right? So let's say that I've got a guitar in my mix. I'm going to go back to all tracks. And let's say that somewhere in my mix, I've got a guitar that is popping out, even though I should just be hearing drum and bass. I'm hearing guitar somewhere. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to see which of my VCAs brings that guitar back in. Let's say that it's in my underscore right here. Or actually, I think my example is that I'm listening to drum and bass, but I'm hearing a guitar. So I would just select this track, come up to the visibility, say show channels. Now I can see everything that feeds into there. One of these, although these are all stems, which I indicate with this little S in brackets, although these are all stems, I should see the guitars somewhere. And if I don't, then I'll just listen each one, or solo or mute, a typical approach to finding out where the heck is it. Let's say that for some reason I find the guitar in here. Then I can select that channel, and once again I can reduce down more by going to show channels that are connected to that. Now I come in, I've only got one track feeding into that. It's coming out of machine, so I'm going to go to machine, and then I'm back into, I can even use, I could go in directly into machine. I could load up the instrument right here, and then I could find out where the heck's that guitar coming from and route it appropriately. Another example is I could just open up my channel settings window and then make sure that I have this view expanded. You can also always see whether or not there are sources feeding into machine. So if this was not machine, but it was maybe like another group track or an instrument track maybe that was being fed by MIDI, I could even track it down here in the note. This doesn't have sources at the moment, but otherwise there would actually be a list of tracks, and then I could select a track and channel settings window would take me there. Really, really cool to be able to navigate that sort of stuff. So let me just check out this last comment. Yeah, because you definitely have that issue a lot. I run into that issue a lot, Michael, where yeah, my trumpets are melody, but I need to have them in the brass stem. Now I can go through and I could just go to all instruments, right? I could find my trumpet right here, and then I just come up here and I say include this in the melody mix, right? And setting up the VCAs and getting, when you create a new VCA, it automatically gets added here. You just have to go through the process of renaming it. And I have those 4 VCAs built into my template. So every project has this routing. Every project has these 4 VCAs in it. And to go a step further, which I won't get into much, I have actually discussed this before, but I actually send those mixes off to QSends, so that I can actually use the QSends in control room to monitor them at any time, which is kind of nice to be able to see levels and that sort of thing. That's definitely beyond the scope of what I wanted to talk about today, but since you guys are interested in it, I just want to point that out. Yes, and orchestrations can change all the time. And so, it's just however flexible we can be as composers, the better, right? And this is a setup that allows me to respond to anything. I can give them any kind of alt mix they want without having to mess up my file, without having to write down long lists of what I muted. I don't have to use mix console snapshots. Although if you do use mix console snapshots, your VCA fader settings will be saved there. I don't use that too often, but that's an advantage as well. Okay, so I hope that has been helpful. If you liked this and you're not a subscriber to the channel, please do subscribe, because subscribing on these videos really tells YouTube that I'm doing good stuff and makes them want to surface my material to more viewers. And I will be back again next week, next Tuesday, and I hope everybody has a great weekend. Thanks for everybody who was online with me today, and post questions, post whatever. I love hearing from you guys, and have a great weekend.